Start the meeting. If you would, before we start, if you could put your phones on silent or off, please. And we would like to welcome everyone to the Design and Historic Review Commission meeting. It is Thursday, June 20th, 10 o'clock a.m., and we have established that we do have a quorum. Our first order of business is the consent agenda. If I could has everybody had a chance to look at it? Okay, if I can get a motion. We're going to go ahead and do them both at the same time.
Motion that we accept both consent agendas.
Okay. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, we will now move into our regular meeting agenda. Our first case is 224-01, 218 and 301 North Oaks, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance to extend the historic district to include the two buildings located at 218 and 301 North Oak Street. Open it for staff.
Good morning, Ray Library Planner. And we are here today to discuss the two buildings, one at 218 North Oaks and one at 301 North Oaks. And if you've noticed, I have only highlighted the main building on the campus. It is the only building being presented today that's on the campus. It is District 3, Harry Thomas, downtown neighborhood. It is RM1 and CGCH zoning, and 0.585 acres and 1.128. So this is the current main building at the freshman campus for Central High School, and I'm going to actually skip ahead one picture. Okay, so I have done a lot of research on both of these buildings, and in my research, the community has decided that we would like to preserve a lot of our buildings, and this building has so much community and just in 1890, the junior colleges started in Texas, and in 1928, in 1927, I'm actually going to say, this was the concept, and they broke ground. If you notice, that doesn't really look as similar to what was actually built. The architecture in that time frame was Art Deco, and so that's what they went with in the drawing. When they were deciding to build it and coming up to it, a lot of the other state buildings, colleges, looked more like this. So they changed plans mid-build. The college was city, let's see, 1928, local contributions and a self-imposed county tax. San Angelo Junior College opened its doors. It was owned by the city schools, and we were one of 17 in the state of Texas that did this. In 1929, the state legislature validated these colleges and established the taxing powers and gave them to local school districts. In 1945, we had our first board of trustees, and SAISD kind of came about. So in all of these pictures, a lot of them, this one was a yearbook picture. This one right here, 1933, it's so gorgeous with all those cars in the background. 1947, this one right here, I want you to pay attention to this building right here. This was also a school building. And then if you notice, nope, go back. Aha, on the same page. If you notice, that building's gone now. So the purpose of doing the historical overlay is to keep the building the way it is, the outside structure. The inside is fine, it can be modernized. The outside is what we want to show. We want to be able to show pictures and remember. I spoke with a lot of students from Edison Edison Junior High that remember this building and went there, and just hearing all the memories, seeing all the pictures, it's beautiful. The next building, 301 North Oaks, this was a lumber yard. It actually was built around the same time as the school. They also, I couldn't find a picture, but there was stories that they originally were going to go with a Art Deco, more modernized look for back in the 20s, 30s, and they decided to look similar to the school. So the brick is the same, there's some similar archways. And if you notice, in 2007 and 2012, there was a building behind it that also was a part of it. It was the stripping room, and did the chemicals with the furniture and the lumber yards and everything. It's now gone. It is another piece of our history that is now removed. If you notice those 5 triangles, I was able to find buildings that are no longer there. If you notice, one is in front of the school gym. The other one, that building that I had mentioned that was across from the gym. This building right here that is now a parking lot, it was an old Western saloon that got torn down in the 60s. So we're trying to keep our culture, our community, by making these buildings historical and preserving. So I did want to also say that the gym and Fort Concho are already historical, under the historical overlay. The gym, I'm not sure why it did not extend to this building originally, but they are already historical. So staff is recommending approval of extending the historical overlay to include both of these buildings. They were built in the late 20s, early 30s, and they are included in both of the 1985 and 2019 historical surveys that were done, that the city had done, and they are listed as contributing. So staff is recommending approval. With that, is there any questions?
Is there any questions for staff?
Can you explain why these 2 buildings are being selected? Why only these 2 buildings are being selected?
Yes. Well, I was kind of hoping to find a picture of them together, but so if you notice, the historical overlay kind of juts out. I'm going to use the pointer. So up here, these buildings, a couple of them are newer. Some of them are warehouse and don't really have the architecture and the historical value that these buildings do. We were trying to extend it over to match what was on the historical survey as contributing.
So I'm going to correct you a little bit. That's not entirely accurate. The 415 East 4th Street that runs along 4th Street, it's RNS construction right now. The 2020 survey of historical sites deemed that as a high priority. And so again, I guess my question is just why these 2 specific buildings when we have other buildings that are historic nearby and that were deemed per a city funded historical survey of the entirety of downtown, why we're ignoring some spots, but why we're just kind of picking and choosing.
Well, let me see if I can answer that. I'm
Yep.
Aaron Benoit, Director of Planning Development Services. We are looking at small incremental development areas, and how do we do that with our historic overlay? The decision in 2022 was not to extend it at that time, but we started looking at properties that were adjacent and would make sense. There is a desire to look at the warehouse district, which really is along 4th Street and up against the railroad spur that's there. We just have not gotten to that. Part of that is due to staffing levels. We just haven't had that ability to do that. In this case, we saw that these two properties are very close and adjacent. We had staff and citizens that said we should include those now, and so we brought this one forward. Starting back in February is when we started this process.
Thank you. So I guess, again, my question is those, when you established the downtown overlay in 2022, it was based off of, a 450-page survey of historic buildings downtown. And there were multiple options presented, and this specific overlay was selected, and it encumbered, multiple properties that were and were not necessarily deemed as high priority. And so I'm really nervous, and I really am kind of opposed to the process of taking an ad hoc approach here. I think if we're going to do this, if we're going to look at encumbering property rights, then I think we need to be looking at doing it in a very holistic fashion. And this is a very ad hoc and kind of like fly-by-night sort of approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have a question too on timing of why are we doing this right now, the only two, and not more, or is there a reason for timing?
Well, timing is about staffing levels and discussions with different folks. We felt like these are two buildings that make a lot of sense. In fact, in one of our drafts, the school district building was included, and for whatever reason, it was excluded when it got to city council in 2022. And so we're just really trying to pick back up where we're looking at the area. Of course, the original proposal from the consultants was a much bigger area. And as we worked with a staff group and a citizen group, we kind of brought that down to this kind of corridor that you see down Chadburn and kind of goes over a little bit to Oaks as you get closer down to Concho. And so we also think this is the right time to do this. As we continue to have development in downtown, we have to look at our historical elements, and if they're worth preserving to keep the history of our downtown, our heritage that we have in our downtown, then we have to act in a timely manner.
I have a question as well. So I'm one of the historical consultants for the state level historical commission as well, and so certainly I see this all the time in historical districts where you ad hoc, and then I see some where it's a larger approach and it's a difficult balance. And so I guess you may not feel comfortable answering this question, and if that's the case, tell me to mind my own business. But my question is more with the central campus itself, and if the decision to add one building rather than more of the buildings is due to the staffing issues, or if that reflects more, there has been community discussion about the value of adding the central campus. And so I guess I'm wondering if you can answer this, if the decision to only add part of the central campus is due to your timing, or if there's broader discussions you're still engaging that motivate that. Because that's one of the other things I noticed, that you do have that jet, there's some parts of that warehouse district not being added, but there's also obviously part of the central campus. And I guess that's not necessary to have that answer right now, but that would inform my decision here. If the plan was to continue through that central campus ad hoc versus not, I think that's important.
Yeah, I think I can answer most of that. And Ray, do you mind going to an image, whether it's an overhead image or a front image of the campus? If you'd notice, and if you've been around that campus, it's had, I would just say, additions over the years. I would say several of the additions, and I don't know the exact timing of those, but I'm going to guess maybe in the 70s, that are currently not a historical significance, where this one is. And through sitting down with discussions with SAISD, while typically we would go and historically overlay an entire property, through the discussions with them to try to minimize the impacts, we looked at, let's just look at the main old campus building that's remaining and try to historically overlay that. So that was our decision in that case.
And so again, here, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable because what we're doing, when we established the Chadburn district, right, we encumbered multiple property owners whose properties weren't necessarily of historical significance or weren't deemed as historical significance. And so those guys are having to play by the DHRC rules and have to get certificates of appropriateness. And if we go through it an ad hoc way, I feel like that's not very even-handed to the property owners that on Chadburn and in the current overlay zone, and also then it's going to create this sort of I think it really just sets a bad precedent, in my opinion.
I think a lot of that, though, too, even though if that property's not in the historical overlay, it still has to abide by the DHRC rules. So really, the only thing that distinguishes that different is they couldn't tear it down, but they still got to adhere to the DHRC rules. because
Correct.
it's in that.
Yes.
They are in the
Yes, that's the only
downtown
difference.
design
It's
district?
just you couldn't tear that building down.
Correct.
So
That's
if
the
they
only
want to do
difference as of
anything to
right now.
that building and keep it, they still have to adhere to our DHRC rules. So really, I don't see,
And so even the entire campus is under the downtown design district, which is different than the historical district that was created in 2022. So that was just a full district. And you see on one of the images, there's a property to the east on Magdalene. It has just by itself historic overlay zoning. So there's two processes that could happen is one, the expansion of the district, which is what we're looking at here. Since it's adjacent to the district, it makes sense to expand the district. That property on North Magdalene has chosen in the past to ask for historic overlay zoning. About, I think, 2021, this area was expanded with the downtown design district, which was not repealed by the historic downtown district. And so properties that did not cover or come into the historic district are covered by the downtown design district, which does have requirements to come to the DHRC for major renovations, aesthetic changes to the entire property.
Okay.
So they're already under those requirements.
So then why are we doing this?
This is to give us the ability to say, this is a historic property, it's part of our heritage for our community, and we want to keep this building in our community. It also allows the staff and the board to decide a higher level of if you're going to renovate or restore.
So it's not the same as being in the downtown historic district?
Well, they
You
still have
just said
rules.
it's a higher level of consideration, is that correct? So it's not the same?
They have design requirements.
Exactly, okay.
any
They
other,
have design requirements and they cannot tear it down. That's the main,
Additional design requirements.
and then they
Yes.
cannot tear it down.
That's correct.
So as of the date that we deem it historic, if that's the way it goes, then the building has to now come up to historic code immediately, or
no,
what
no,
happens there?
no.
Okay.
No, it does not.
So,
Only if they proposed a change that affected the exterior, we would have the authority to review it, potentially bring it to the board if it doesn't fall under administrative review, and discuss what's the appropriate renovation or restoration for that property, for that area of the building.
And we're just providing a recommendation to the city council, but the city council
Correct.
has the final vote.
Correct.
So if we say it needs to be in the historic overlay, then the city council can go, no, they can do whatever they want, they can tear it down.
That is correct.
Okay.
This is a zoning case.
Okay.
And so it does place a land use over that, it would be over that specific building and the other property there on North Oaks, that city council has the final say.
Okay. And is it on, so if, whichever way we vote, when will it go to city council?
I think we anticipate the second meeting in July, I
First.
believe. The
July
first
2nd.
meeting in July 2nd?
July 2nd.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Okay, we will now open it up for public discussion, public comment. Somebody would like to please state your name.
All right. Good morning. Monica Ramos, Director of Downtown San Angelo. I think most of you have a handout. I may have been short one. This is a document here that shows a few properties of lost architecture within our downtown. As you know, historic buildings give our district their character. They attract visitors. They tell stories. They connect our past to our present. They're educational components. And so if we had the option to extend this overlay all across downtown, that would be really great. But these two properties are on the agenda here, and so it is our duty to express our concern of what could happen to these properties if they're lost. And so the first photo that you see there is the Rust Building. This structure was torn down in 1975, and then it was transformed into a parking lot. You also see that parking lot there and see how it can be detrimental to creating an attractive district. There's times when this parking lot can appear deserted and empty, and this is an unfavorable view of the appeal of our district if we have more incidences like this example here. And then as you go through the next couple of photos, those are just some other examples of historic properties that have been altered, removing the historic architecture and the character of those properties. You see 106 South Chadburn, 36 West Beauregard Avenue, where the St. Angeles Hotel is lost. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to point out that, I mean, I think that you're very right, but just the architect in me just wants to point out that the 36 West Beauregard Avenue was designed by O'Neill Ford, who's one of the prominent or the preeminent mid-century modern architects, and it's actually really a masterpiece. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you. And then you see 17 South Chadburn, where this was actually a photo that we researched, and I really had no idea what the original Standard Times building looked like. And today there's only a very small piece that's left of that building, and you wouldn't, I mean, by looking at it, you wouldn't even know what was there and know the history behind it. It's very unrecognizable. So we're thankful that the Design and Historic Review Commission exists to prevent properties from being altered significantly like these examples. And then the last photo here, this is actually great to see that 218 North Chadburn has existed and been preserved for so long, 96 years. Downtown San Angelo would like to see that preservation continue for this property. There may be concerns or stresses about going through the Design and Review Commission, but Downtown San Angelo can connect property owners to free Main Street design assistance so that we can have discussions on what future design could look like if there were any proposed changes to the exterior of the property. Future uses for the property could be venue space. Pickleball is very popular. Maybe it could be a pickleball space. You know, there's so many other alternatives as to what it could be used for. So I don't think that it would be left to be forgotten. And so if we don't protect these historic properties, let's just remember that we're losing our city's history and the culture, and we do want to protect and preserve that and hope that these buildings do continue to stand for the appeal of our downtown.
If we could, we need to keep these to around 3 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, if we could keep all the comments to around 3 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson Mazur, Commissioners. Karen Hesse-Smith, Single Member District 5. I'm going to speak in more general terms, but before that, I'd like to address Mr. Wayner and say that the designation of individual buildings is not without precedent. There are other cities that have done this and continue to do this. And so his concern that it's an ad hoc process and improper in some way, I'm not sure that I can agree with that. So let me go forward with my original comment and ask all of you, if you were asked to define what a building is, how would you respond? Would you say that it is a structure made of bricks and mortar, wood and metal? Indeed, a building is nothing more than a series of walls covered with a roof that protects whatever is inside from whatever is outside. That answer is too simple, though, because throughout history, buildings across the world have secured a place in the hearts of many, often for reasons far beyond the simple definition. In truth, historic buildings have been symbols of great sentimental value for generations, and that will likely remain true for many generations to come. But why? Why are they important? Why are they worth protecting? I have a few reasons to offer you. Quote, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us," end quote, said Sir Winston Churchill in his speech to the meeting in the House of Lords, October 28, 1943, requesting that the House of Commons, bombed out in May 1941, be rebuilt exactly as before, because of its value as a cultural icon and as an inspiration to the people of that city. The essential message at the heart of his statement is that historic buildings are of great intrinsic value to communities worldwide. Protecting and conserving those symbols of our history is beyond price. Specifically addressing the building at 218 North Oaks, once San Angelo High, and by the way, the alma mater of many people in this room, me included, is actually 115 years old by my research. It was built on the site of the city's first graveyard. It was built in 1909. Just imagine the stories it could and can tell. Did you know that the average lifespan of a 21st century building is around 50 years? When it comes to the topic of modern day building infrastructure, the phrase "they don't make them like they used to" most definitely applies. Historic buildings that predate 1939, the start of the Second World War, are especially significant. Keep in mind that date of 1909. Those buildings feature some of the highest quality materials ever seen, as well as featuring materials like rare wood from old forests that no longer exist. Many pre-World War II buildings reflect a quality and level of craftsmanship that today's modern facilities cannot compete with. The sheer cost alone of replacing these materials would be astronomical. I will turn in my statement to the Secretary. Thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Is there someone else who'd like to speak on this project?
Hello, my name is Jackson Holland. I'm an ASU student and a lifelong resident of Tom Green County. I find many aspects of my life indirectly tied back to this building's existence. Both my grandma and my mom went to Central High School all 4 years and thus have their freshman education tied into 218 North Chadbourn. Not to mention, without this building, Angelo State University would never have existed. I would just be a third-generation high school graduate if it had not been built. Think about how many lives this building has improved by nature of its existence since 1909. I believe that constitutes at least some level of historical preservation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just two quick corrections. 1909, the original
Can you
San
please
Angelo
state your name for the
Sorry.
record?
My name is Taylor Kingman. Two quick corrections before my prepared
Thank you.
statement. The 1909 building, I believe, is San Jacinto. That was the original San Angelo High. This was the actual junior college, but not. So we're talking about two different buildings at two different locations, just for clarity, as far as having our ducks in a row. So anyway, my name is Taylor Kingman. I'm here today in my capacity as president of the SISD Board of Trustees. As president, I'm the official spokesperson for the board. In regards to agenda item 2224-01, the addition of 218 North Oaks to the Historic District, as a board, we voted 7-0 to oppose this recommendation by the city for this property to be added to the district. The SISD Board of Trustees is a publicly elected board and a taxing entity. We are governed by the Texas Code of Education, Chapter 11, Subchapter D. We are charged to oversee the management of the district, and the trustees as a body have the exclusive power and duty to govern and oversee the management of the public schools. As a board, we feel the appropriate mechanism is in place for the public to have a voice at the management of our facilities, as we are elected single-member districts with one at-large member. We feel any designation would diminish the voters' choice of what may need to happen to these facilities in the future. We as a whole do value the historic nature of many of our facilities, and moving forward, we intend to look at all of our facilities. If a facility is adaptable and inspires students to excellence, we will look to preserve it. In this ordinance, we have several specific concerns. First, it is important to remember our goal as a board is to make sure the district is educating children of the community, fulfilling expectations of the parents, and supporting our teachers and staff, all while being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. It is important that the money entrusted to us is allocated judiciously to meet the evolving needs of our students, our community, and maintain all of our facilities. That is why as a district, we are consolidating campuses to increase efficiencies and improve educational support for our students. Education requires flexibility and innovation. Increasing any regulations on our facilities will add additional financial constraints that are already being impacted by inflation and changes to public education at a state level. Although the city has recommended the designation to one building on the property, this designation will affect the entirety of the property. Currently, we plan to use a newer part of our facility for CTE for the entirety of the following year. And we are in the midst of a district assessment of our current infrastructure to create a long-term plan for San Angelo ISD. We will have the results of this assessment in the fall. We are concerned that any designation may limit our ability to use this large property in the central aspect of town in the best way to improve our students' education in the district. I will hand this over to Ms. Miza Flint to continue, but it is on the agenda,
Chairman,
so I think you can.
We usually give 5 full minutes to if there's a property owner involved. And since he is representing the SISD board, I say we allow him to continue.
Please, continue.
Yeah, thank you. We are also concerned about this ordinance setting a precedent for older campuses throughout the city. We have several campuses built in 1909, not this one. Unfortunately, we also live in a time where school security is paramount. We have specific standards laid out by state legislature and safety standards for each of our buildings. We are concerned that this designation may limit our ability to implement the most modern safety standards for our students and staff. Also, the reality is we live in a conservative town, and as a board, we feel this is an unnecessary regulation on a publicly elected taxing entity, which will increase taxpayer dollars and decrease available funds for education. Personally, I feel the timing of this has been based on rumors and don't have a lot of validity. The reality is this building has been in the same location since 1929 and was not included in the initial historic overlay. If the city is concerned about what other entities other than the Board of Trustees may do with this property, I've already stated they will be using it for career and technical education for the following year. And the city has previously told me and the Board of Trustees that completing the designation can be done in 8 weeks. At the moment, the property can be used for a host of things, such as a new elementary school, a career and technology facility, or an event facility. If the property were ever to be sold, which there are no current plans to do, it would be in the best interest of the district to value the property for its location and the possibility of increasing the tax revenue to the district. It's a win-win for the city and the district if it was to be sold, it would be sold to someone who pays taxes. As opposed to selling it for a nominal amount or keeping it off the tax rolls. There are a host of other concerns, but simply, we oppose the designation as we are not sure how this designation helps inspire students, staff, and improves educational outcomes for students in San Angelo, and that's our job. As this item is on the agenda, I'm happy to answer any questions, because I believe that's legal. No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Virgil Paccetti. I'd like to say that I think preserving that building is important to the community. A lot of us went to school there. A lot of our parents went there. Some of us have grandparents great-grandparents that actually built the place. I'd like to comment on the school district. They had their meeting on Thursday, and when they started to discuss this building, the first thing that Mr. Dindal said was, well, if they do this, then it's going to hinder our ability to sell the building. So if they're not thinking about selling the building, then why is that the first thing that came out of their mouth? And that is recorded, and you can watch that on YouTube. I have a feeling that their concern is marketability of the building. And they have right now, if you look at their Parker Hill outlay for their bond, saving this building or doing any repairs to this building is not in their future agenda. So they will tell you that, yes, CTE will be there for the next year, but they won't tell you what they're gonna do beyond that. This board is an elite 8. They do not listen to the public. I've been going there for 2 years. They will not respond to you. They will not talk to you. They have a communication department with a $400,000 budget. Did they put out anything to the community saying, hey, we're gonna go speak on this, please let us know what you think? No, because they're the elite 8. They only want you to hear what they think. There are citizens in this community that wanna save that building. If you wanna talk to the district, if you try to implore them in a conversation, they will tell you to go through the grievance process. And then you have to go through 3 stages before you can even talk to them. What parent?
Could you keep your comments related to this item and not on the processes
Sure.
of the district, please? Thank you.
So the community should have a voice. Please don't just listen to 8 people, listen to the community. And I think if you reach out there that all the people that have gone to that school, have been in that school, you know, don't want it torn down or repurposed for some other reason. And if they want to repurpose it, do it so with the facade that it has. You know, we'll never have that architecture in this community again. I mean, that is a vestige of a time in the past. And to think that some architect would come and say, you know what, we're gonna be inspired by this building and build another one like it, it's not gonna happen. So please preserve our past. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment?
Hi, my name's Lisa Mahler. I'm a local historian and genealogist. I believe what is done with this building is doable for both the school district and saving the essence of the location. You have to remember that our early city fathers wanted a college. We lost the bid to have Texas Tech. And they knew that kids locally needed a place to go to school to extend their education, including my father, who could not afford to go out of town to a school. And it's important that both the school district, the city council, this committee all work together for saving as much as we can. I did a recent program on the early homes, and it's hard to believe that so many were torn down that could have been repurposed. Repurposing is important. Keep the essence of what the building was originally there. It needs to be taught in history about anytime someone comes forward with an idea, you need to ask them, what's the history of that building and location? A lot of people do not know the history of this town, and that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Hello, my name is Destiny Hasso. I work at Downtown San Angelo, Inc. Our board president, Michelle Babish, cannot be here today, so I will speak on her behalf. My name is Michelle Babish. My husband Jody and I own Old Central Firehouse. Speaking firsthand, I see the importance of historical preservation daily. We have people stay at the Airbnb who are in San Angelo to experience the history and our rich heritage of our town. Our visitors want to be in downtown because this is the heart of our city. If we do not preserve as much as we can, there will not be much left to see for future generations. I think it is important to point out that not only do we see visitors, but we also see locals. Locals make up about 40% of the Airbnb's business. These are San Angelans who want to get away but not too far. They want to experience the greatness of our town by purposefully staying downtown so that they do not have to have the distractions of everyday life, but rather they can feel that like they are on vacation and experience their town in a way that they cannot during the usual work week when they are working, caring for kids, etc. Each of our buildings holds its own unique history and tells a story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Andy Markey, on the Board of Directors for Downtown San Angelo. I just wanted to express that I am in favor of supporting this property and designating it as a historic property, and just wanted to refresh everybody's memory of some additional properties in downtown that were able to adhere by the additional design requirements of being a historic property, which includes Eggemeyer's, the Cactus Hotel, Old Central Firehouse, City Hall, our courthouse, the Three Sisters buildings, which include Fat Boss, our bus station, the original San Angelo National Bank, which is Miss Hattie's, the Schwartz and Rass building, which is Jay Wilde's, Old Town Homes, Legend Jewelers, Marshall Pints, Western Mattress Buildings, Myers Drug, all of the churches in downtown, Fort Concho, Blue Buffalo Art Gallery, and the Santa Fe Depot, and many more.
Can I add, I've looked at this boundary and I'm fairly certain that Western Mattress, the Old Central Firehouse, and a few others are actually not part of this overlay zone. Is that correct?
Of the historic district?
Of the zone that we're speaking about right now. Because they're on the,
I think you're,
anything that's on the east side of Oak Street, which would be the Central Firehouse, Western Mattress, Sealy Flats, are not a part of this zone that we're speaking about right now. Is that correct?
I feel very confident in saying you are correct on Central Firehouse, that is not in the historic district.
I was referencing these are historic properties that were able to adhere by the historic standards, which was a concern of designating this building today.
But I think they are within the downtown design district or the river corridor district, which again, yes. I agree what you're saying, is that they're not in the historic overlay or the historic downtown district.
Correct.
I'm not sure if they have historic overlay or not. I'd have to look at the maps to be sure. This really doesn't tell me what I would need to know, to be honest, but I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Good morning. My name is Amy Mazel Flint. I'm the Vice President of SAISD, but I'm here speaking on behalf of myself. So having said that, I would like to just remind you and the people here that we're an elected board as well by the citizens of San Angelo, and we are elected to represent the schools and its buildings and the oversight of both. Personally, I feel like because of that, an ordinance like this would really be government oversight. I think that the city can work with the school board can work with the design board and the city to accomplish the goals that we all want to see happen. Nobody wants to tear down a building that has been in our community since 1928. I think that many of us, including many prominent members of our community, have been kind of subject to what I call the San Angelo rumor mill and think that the building's already been sold. We already have plans to knock it down, that they're going to build a parking lot there. None of that is true. The board has never discussed the possibility of selling this building. I'm not sure what the previous speaker talked about. If it was mentioned in a board meeting, it was kind of a hypothetical comment. It wasn't, because there aren't any plans to sell the building. We currently have a purpose for that building, like Dr. Kingman said, and that's to have CTE, Career and Technical Education, moved from a lot of it from Howard College to bring it back into our district and into our district. So we have a use for that building in mind. There's only an intention to grow that, not to shrink it. So it's not like we're going to just do that for 1 year and then move. It takes way too much time and effort to make a change like that for just 1 year. So we are not looking at doing that for 1 year and then maybe making a change. That's not in our plans. And it's important. I just want to make sure that we are also aware that we're already in that historic design district. So we are already part of that. We don't have any intent to make any changes. We love the design of that building. And so I just think I would much rather have a discussion about maybe there being discussion with future changes rather than something being imposed that could cost extra money, cost our taxpayers extra money, and make things much more difficult as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, we will close public comment now and
So,
open it up to,
Before you start deliberation, let me make sure everybody's clear on what the
Okay.
law is. First of all, that the state statute as well as our local code does allow us to designate areas, as we have done, or individual properties. So as one of the speakers said, there's nothing improper about considering just a specific property, whether or not it's adjacent to the district we've established. And second, you guys can feel free during the deliberations to call any of the speakers or anybody else back up and ask them questions if you have specific questions for them.
okay, thank you. Okay, we will now open it up to the board for discussion. I mean, my feeling to me is the overriding fact of if it's marketable or saves money on taxes, to me is irrelevant. I mean, that building is an historical building. It needs to be preserved by the city. It's just, I saw a program the other day where they had 128 historical homes in San Angelo, and back then there was no regulations. You know, and I know the city's trying to grow and advance and be active, and they tore down. There's only like 28 of those houses left, and you just can't reproduce stuff like that. And I don't think changing even if you did change the zoning on this, it's not going to make any difference for the school board or who owns the property. I just don't see that.
The building's phenomenal. It's irreplaceable. I don't disagree with that at all. It's a phenomenal landmark.
Yes.
My concern is with the process that we're going about doing this. We're a government entity that's talking about encumbering property rights of owners. I think when we do that, I think we have to be above reproach. I think any type of that procedure has to be deliberate and considered and thoughtful. And I think we also have to be, any of this process needs to be equitable and fair-minded. And I know that it's legal by state, but that doesn't mean that I think it's appropriate to take in just single properties here and there, because I think that sets a really bad precedent for picking properties potentially based on relationships with owners. I think there needs to be a considerable more discussion about maybe increasing the entire district rather than just picking ad hoc properties. I think that really creates a chance for shenanigans, if we will. That's my concern.
Anybody else have any other comment?
Well, probably too many. I know of one structure that's
I don't think your
historic.
mic is on. Can you push your button on your, there you go.
It's a beautiful old building that is cut stone, removed far from any other historic area. And it's one of those places that when I think about it, I drive by it and look at it. I'm just interested in, architecture and history. Those are some of my loves. But I don't see that ever getting just swept into one giant space of historic overlay. So I think that there are times when it's appropriate to say, this is an example, this is worth saving. I had a friend move back to San Angelo this last year. She's a published author. She found out that this building was going to be considered for a historic designation. She started doing research, and she has a very personal interest in it. Her father actually watched the construction of this building and lived somewhere near that neighborhood, and he told her as a young child, this is the best built building in San Angelo. And that stuck with her. And then her family went on to teach there and to be educated in that building. So I know she represents a group of people with that kind of love and interest in that structure. And I think it's important that we consider not only architecture, but we consider that life web. A historic building can have adaptive reuse. It can be repurposed. It can have a lot of things done to make it current and modern. But preserving that fabric is what kind of ties a town together. Thank you.
So I guess one comment I would make real quick. I'm a historian, so I would love a world where historic preservation doesn't have to have valuation attached to it, where you preserve buildings just because they're old and special and you don't have to justify that. And I would love to see where you can extend historical overlays over entire downtowns before you have the chance for various forces to undo that. But I do also think, and I support what this recommendation, but I do think it's also fair and valuable to consider sometimes the economic arguments, because sometimes there are real economic burdens and sometimes the perception is that there are economic burdens attached to this. And if the perception is that there are economic burdens being added or that it's unequitable, I think that is something you have to address. And so in this case, again, just speaking from my own experience, what motivates me here to support the historical overlay is because through my other work at the state level, I have seen more than once cases where the group that had current oversight, for example, the school board, legitimately did not plan to do anything with that building. But 10 years down the road, by the time they got around to it, the building was gone. And it had nothing to do with the intentions of the group then in charge, but elections happen, people die, people move. And so what motivates me here is not so much, certainly not distrust of the school board or anything like that, but distrust of change over time. I feel blasphemous as a historian for saying that, but it's change over time. And so if all you can get at times is a single building, I think even if that isn't ideal for me at least, that sometimes it's worth getting that. But I think these are important conversations to have along the way. Is this process a good, and I think this is, I think that's why we're having these conversations. So that's my 2 cents. I think this building is worth saving, and I think it's worth extending this now because we do live in a time of accelerated change. We live in a time where elections happen. We live at a time where this could never be replicated, and there's so many key historical moments in our city's history that played out right here. So I don't know if I added anything there, but that's my take on this.
No, that's great. Thank you.
My take is that they're already under our board on design aspects. This just keeps them or anybody in the future from tearing it down. So, and again, it's up to the city council to take our recommendation and they vote on it and they have the final decision. I think our discussion is important in what our opinion is, but again, it's just keeping them from tearing down the building. So.
Any other discussion?
If we're talking about buildings that are at risk of being torn down, the Masonic Lodge has changed hands multiple times over the last couple of years, and it's directly next to Shannon. And so again, I just go back to the equitable and even-handedness of this process and why these things aren't being considered simultaneously. Silly Flats, again, is right there next to Shannon. If that is the concern of keeping these historic buildings, I'd like to have a more holistic approach to it.
We can certainly look at that. The Masonic Lodge does have a historic overlay zoning as just its single building. So it is a protected building. I agree, there are a number of structures in our downtown and around town, not just in downtown. This one being so close to the historic district makes sense to expand the historic district. Now, I agree, there are some other properties that probably are adjacent that could be considered, but staff has a challenge of, do we do something very large? Do we do something very small? And small incremental development is kind of where we start out. If there's desire for future looks, we will look at the future. But I think our old wool processing building out there in an industrial district is a beautiful building. I don't know if anybody's ever gone up there and looked at it, but for historic preservation of our heritage and our history, those are some amazing facilities around town that we have.
Yeah, I think that's some good recommendation. I think we need to stay on track with what we're voting on right now. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that's another,
This is
another
this is on track,
discussion.
though. I'm talking
Yeah.
about consistency, right? And so the Masonic Lodge is part of the downtown design, but it's not part of this DHRC overlay. And so I think we need to be consistent, and I think we need to be even-handed here. And so it exactly has to do with this discussion at hand.
Can I ask a question? And this may reveal my complete ignorance on the subject, so I apologize ahead of time. But, and this is making sure I understand the difference between city and state level pushes here. So I know that at the state level, it is oftentimes, easier to extend historic districts when the properties are adjacent rather than picking up properties that are a further distance away. So adjacency matters, proximity matters, and the ease of extending overlays later on through addendums. Is that the case as well at the city level, or is it just as easy to pick up a property for a district that is not like literally adjacent? Does it make a difference or not?
It doesn't make a difference. We can put a historic overlay on any property regardless of the underlying zoning that's involved. We could, yes.
Yeah, I agree with Brooks. I think that the process is important and to be consistent for sure. It doesn't feel great that the timing is kind of, these two buildings. How about we look at the other buildings as well? That doesn't mean that it's not important to reserve the history of the building. Yes, for sure. So I hope that you guys do look at the other buildings too during this process. And it just doesn't feel good to put tax things on an owner who says, we can't do it, it's for our city. It just doesn't feel great. But I do think that we have to reserve the historic preservation of the building as well. So it puts us in a hard spot.
Okay, moving on. Is there any other discussion? Somebody like to make a motion?
Can I real quick add? So on the June 16th, 2022 board meeting, it was brought up by the chief planner, Jeff Fisher, that a 3/4 majority vote is required by the DHRC for property owners that do not consent to their property becoming historically designated.
You're doing my job. I was just fixing to say that.
We have to have a supermajority. We'd have to have 6 out of the 7 to vote.
Okay.
So would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the recommendation of the planning
Staff?
board.
Okay. Can I get a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nay.
We have 6 for, 1 opposed. Motion passes. Okay, we will now move on to our next case. CA 24-1420 West Beauregard Avenue, a request for a certificate of appropriateness for 2 entrance awnings over doors, including removal of the old awnings, construction, and painting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherry Bailey, Principal Planner, and take a minute just to get to the area that we're talking about. This is we have 2 small areas on the Sacred Heart Church and School where the awnings or the marquees, whichever one you want to call that area, they're in a dangerous situation. In most cases, they have been there, haven't really been touched since the school was built. It's deteriorated. They need to replace it so that it doesn't collapse. Their intent is, and I will have the applicant come up in just a minute, I hope. Their intent is to go in, remove that area, and then reconstruct, and then paint it the same color that it presently is. The concern that staff has expressed in the staff report is the fact that it is built into the wall of the adjoining building, and staff is concerned about that and has asked that one of the conditions reference having an engineer to look at the two structures before they're removed, just to make sure that there isn't any unforeseen consequences of removing it. And then to remind the board that this structure is within the historic district, and as such, when there is work that is done, the work is supposed to replicate the existing building. And in this case, I'm not sure that that is totally, even though the second one, which is interior and hard to see, I don't believe that the design of how they're replacing it will necessarily, it's not going to be just like it is at the present time. And I think that's a decision that the board needs to weigh as part of the request. Staff did recommend approval with 3 conditions. Number 1, that an encroachment agreement with the city be obtained for the one where there's an extension out over the sidewalk. That the colors, repairs, and materials be consistent with those that the board ends up recommending, and that the applicant shall obtain all required permits from building permits and provide them with an engineer's concurrence that removing the concrete awning marquees will not affect the stability of the adjacent existing exterior walls. Are there any questions?
Anybody have any questions for staff?
The new material is going to be wood, is that correct?
The replacement material is going to essentially be wood, yes.
Okay, thank you. We will now open it up for public comment. Is someone here like to speak on this? Nope. Okay, we'll close that, open it up to the board. I think whatever they need, they're going to do with it. We really don't have a lot of information, but it needs to match exactly what they have right now. That's my opinion. So it looks to me like they really don't need to tear it down. They could almost just re-lath it and replaster it and put a roof on it. That's just my thought. But I think it needs to match exactly what's there.
Mm-hmm. And we're just talking about, and it's concrete?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's concrete.
we're just talking
They
about those
poured it.
concrete.
They actually poured it.
Little, this is not vertical, horizontal structures right
Yes.
there, the awnings. Yeah, I mean, so the question is, you were suggesting.
Well, I went and looked
fixing
at it, and I
as
didn't
is.
see where it needed to be torn down myself.
No, the
It's
last
just
picture looked
the
pretty
plaster
awful, but-
coating is what's coming off of it.
Yeah.
But the actual structure underneath is, they could re-lath it and
This is
plaster it,
the-
it'd look just like it does right now.
I don't know enough about construction,
Put a
that
roof
looks
on
awful
it
to me.
instead of tearing it down.
But I mean, I don't care what material it is if it looks the same, because sometimes you do have to consider structure and stability, but I mean, I trust someone who
Because wouldn't that
says-
just be cosmetic? I mean, if they don't really tear it down, I mean, I know if they tear it down, then, then that opens up a whole nother.
That's correct. If they were to remove it, I think that
Yeah,
would trigger a
but-
permit at some
So
stage.
there's no one here.
If you're doing a
Okay.
cosmetic repair to fix it, and, yeah.
So we need to know if it can be repaired and if it's cosmetic or if it's structurally unsound, right?
But in their request, they're saying that they're going to take it down. So how do we handle something like that? We just say, look, I don't want to be responsible for that unless they get an engineer over to look at it and say, look, it can be cosmetically repaired and not torn completely down.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think
Yeah, that other one's
that
scary.
is, I looked at it and it doesn't need to be taken down, but I'm not gonna be a structural engineer on it. If staff is recommending it anyway to get an engineer,
We are. We felt
that would be my
was
request. Let them,
necessary
if the engineer
because
says
of the
it can be
construction.
repaired without tearing it down, then so be it.
So the engineering request is to make sure that the remaining structure is sound if they remove it, is that correct?
Well, and to make sure, yes, that
The way they tied it in.
the way it's
Because-
tied in.
So are you saying you want an engineer to look at what's existing?
I think it just can be cosmetically repaired. That's what I'm saying, but I don't want to say that and then it falls down on somebody, so I don't want to.
Yeah, I would want like or formally someone to go out there and tell me
Yeah,
it could be
say-
cosmetically repaired, because when I look at that, at least the second picture looks pretty scary. And so if it is removed, I think it needs to be removed with an engineer saying, hey, we're maintaining structural stability, and if it can be done cosmetically, then do it that way. And either way, if it has the appearance that matches this in terms of colors, then I think you can, I think you can handle it either way with not too much difficulty. The question is, do you have to remove it, or can you just re-pour it? And that's a big difference there.
That's with other types of things that we've gotten in that's been presented to us. It's already been looked at, planned out, materials, all that, and this is not. So they're just guessing at this point and wanting us to clear them of all that. So I think they need to have a clear laid out plan of what they're going to do. And if that requires an engineer going and looking and assessing it and saying it's cosmetic, or it does need to be torn down, and this is how we're going to guarantee that, the existing structures on the side are not affected, then I would vote on that. I don't want to approve this.
So it sounds like that instead of modifying that third condition, that there might be a desire to table this item, have staff bring the applicant in and say, we really need someone to go out and look at that, give us a report, and give us exactly what you're doing, what materials, how you're putting it back. Bring that forward to you guys to be able to approve what's actually happening.
I think that would be better, instead of us just voting on it right now. If we just tabled it, and that gives them the option, then maybe y'all could do it internally instead of bringing it back to us with an engineer, or does that need to come back again?
Well, I think the construction piece, if it does have to be reconstructed, I believe it would need to come back to get y'all's approval of how they're going to put it back.
There's just no information on that
If it
sheet
ends
they
up being
gave
a
us.
cosmetic repair,
Yeah.
I think that could be done administratively, but I lean to your agreeance that I'm not sure we have enough information to make that decision at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's the key first step before we can do anything, is to know if it's a cosmetic issue or a structural issue. Yeah, I don't think we can.
Okay.
Because coat of paint's easy.
So I think it still would need an action by the board, if your desire is to table it, and let staff work with the applicant, and if needed, bring it back the next meeting. But I think there would be an action needed.
I think this is a bit putting the cart before the horse. I'd like to see an engineer's opinion on it. I think that's
That's what I'm saying. That's what I think,
just for
too.
safety.
Yeah.
So somebody, do
you
we
go
need to have a
back to
vote
the
to table
drawing?
it, or we need a motion?
I'll move to table it.
Okay, can you get a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we
Do I
have
need
a
to say
motion and a
why?
second to table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, and begin by stating their name and address or single-member district. Please limit all remarks to less than 3 minutes. Any public comment? I think we had a lot of public comment. Okay, we'll close that. We'll go to division report.
Good morning. Aaron Benoit, Director of Planning and Development Services. Wanted to give you our division report. I actually had a good conversation with our board chair in our pre-meeting for this DHRC about some of our criteria and cases just similar to what you just saw of how we as city staff bring those forward and present them. We talked about some different ideas, but what I would like to do is get back to what our historic preservation design guidelines are for certain types of properties. And so let me explain that a little further. It even came up in our first case just a little bit. In 2022, when the historic district was created, at that time, City Council adopted all of these guidelines for all the design districts. So all the design districts are under the same guidelines right now. What we really want to do is really get back to contributing historic properties have a certain threshold that they have to meet, and then step that down for non-contributing properties, and even those that may end up in the cultural district or just on the fringes of our downtown design district. By doing that, I think that's going to help our citizens understand a little bit better what to do to move forward. For us to do that, what I'm going to ask Chairman Mazur to do is to maybe ask the board to see who would like to sit on a committee to start going through the guidelines to say this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, what is expected from a case from staff, and how do we get this to our community. I think that's very important that we, if we're going to create guidelines and actual rules, and we're going to stick to those rules, that I'll just say for the last presentation, say if it was a historical property, which that one is, it needs to be restored back to the original. And if that is concrete and metal, then they need to go back with concrete and metal. Now, you as the board would have the discretion to say, okay, well, we think that may be excessive, but at least from the staff's perspective, here's our rules, our guidelines, we've explained them to the citizens, and bring that forward to you guys. Then that is not always putting the decision on y'all's shoulders of, well, do we need to design this for them? Do we need to make this decision? Here's what our clear guidelines are. So we have recognized that as city staff. It actually helps our staff to have very clear guidelines. The caveat and the challenge is when you break out of that flexibility, it becomes much more black and white. And so there's not as much gray in there to give some kind of grace for different projects. And so that's where I personally believe that the design districts should be controlling. You have your historic district that is the highest threshold. The properties that are contributing within that historic district are at the very highest, and those that are non-contributing, they may still have some requirements and standards, but they're not as high as the historic. And then you have the downtown design district as well as the cultural design district. So that's my ask to you, Chairman Mazur, if you're interested in entertaining that, but I do think that is a way that city staff can help our citizens and help this board move forward in a more efficient manner.
Thank you, Aaron. I agree. I think we just need a little bit more consistency and a little bit better guidelines for what we're actually dealing with. So do we need to pick people now, or just something we can do after the meeting, or what?
We can certainly do it after the meeting.
Okay.
If there's certain people that are very interested in that, I think we have to be careful of creating a quorum. And as I see our legal counsel's head nod, that was good. So it's probably going to look at a limit of 3. I also do think that although if Brooks is interested as being an architectural representative, there's also Al Torres on the city staff that's an architectural representative. Because I think part of it too is teaching staff, including me, some of those architectural designs of the buildings that we are trying to represent in our community. I think we have some general ideas, but there's specifically some design elements that we just are not familiar enough with that could help us in the future. But I do think, and I also think that there's a chance that whether we involve downtown San Angelo, since they're very big in historic preservation, they might be able to help us understand the guidelines as well as help promote this is what, if somebody's coming into a building, this is what what the threshold would be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, announcements. The next regular meeting of the Design and Historic Review Commission is scheduled to begin on Thursday, July 18, 2024 at 10 a.m. in the East Mezzanine Meeting Room in City Hall at 72 West College Avenue. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Thank you.
Okay. put you on another committee.